It begins again. Oh. Chapter 7. That looks correct. Oh, I'm really bad at this. I'll be back in a moment. I'm so good at this.
Oh, 任せろや。
Hooray! After we got back, Kurusu and I were met with some good news. Shinjo had come here in the afternoon, and that's what he had worked out. There were several reasons. First, Frisia couldn't keep her anymore, but due to her power, it would be difficult to give her to a normal orphanage. Second, Shinjo was taking a different route than the other officers on the case, so he said he couldn't give her to a police facility. And the most important thing of all was that this was what Uki wanted. Having her old friend Yui here seemed to be helping her a lot. She blushed a little and nodded.
なに、むしろこっちがありがたいってもんだ。誰かさんと違ってとっても気が利くし、家事の手際もいい。
And, well, it was nice knowing him.
もう少し元気になったら、委員の手伝いもしてくれるって言うし、大助かりだ。
父さん、それは私に対する当てつけと考えていいの？
Yui pouted, but Dad just laughed and ran his hands through her hair.
部屋はどこにしようかしら。今空いてるところってないわよね。
私と一緒でいいでしょ？ね。
そういうわけにはいかないわ。ユウとはどうするの？
別にいいじゃない。平気よね、ユウ。
Wow!
ほら、ユウと困ってるでしょ。ダメよ。
だったら僕の部屋は？
嘘。タクルに行ってもやらしい。
Don't think that's what he meant.
いくらなんでもそれまずいだろう。
違うよ。そういう意味じゃなくて。
I assume he's meaning like he'll be back at the RV or something like that. Once this case was settled, I intended to leave, yeah. Jump to all sorts of conclusions. So I could sleep in the dining room or something, and she could have my room. But Kurusu seemed to know exactly what I was thinking, and she poked me in the stomach.
なんだよ。
ダメですからね。また勝手に出て行ったら。
ここにいるのは事件が終わるまでって約束したろ。
そうだけど、あなたがだらしないからよ。一人暮らしなんて気が気じゃないって何度も言ってるでしょ。
Dad suddenly slapped his hands together.
ああ、そうだ。一つ部屋が空いてるじゃないか。
え？
ほら、今は使ってないが、以前ナースの宿直室だった。
あそこって物置じゃない今。
でもな、日当たりもいいし、物置にしとくのはもったいないと思ってたんだ。
そう思ってたのなら、もっと早く片付けてほしかったわ。
Kurusu sighed and turned to me.
明日部屋の片付けをしましょう。手伝ってね。はーい。
Yuto answered cheerfully.
でも今夜はどうしようか。ゆいとうきちゃんが一緒で、ゆうとは父さんとでいい？
よし決まり。布団用意しなきゃ。ゆう手伝ってくれる？私自分でやりますから。大丈夫。うきちゃんは何がどこにあるのかまだ分かってないでしょ。あと敬語はいいってば。はい。だからそこははいじゃなくてうんうん。ね、言ってみて。でも私も手伝うので。そう？それじゃあ一緒に。
ああ、ちょっと待ってくれ。
I stopped Uki before Yui could take her out of the room.
どうしたのタクルに。
山添、新庄さんから話は聞いたけど、もう一回だけ確認させてくれないかな。
はい。
僕のスマホ、今どこにあるか本当に知らないんだよな。
スマホ？ほら、こういうのだよ。
Yui took out her phone and showed it to Uki. When she saw it, she finally seemed to remember.
ああ、新庄さんが見せてくれた電話機のことですね。あれは、落ちていた場所に戻したんです。
その後、誰が拾ったのかわからないか？
はい、すみません。
そっか。
So it was just as Shinjo had said after all. Then who had my phone and the picture inside it? How had they been able to call Ito's phone? Good questions.
タクルに、もういい？話は終わり？
ああ。
それじゃあ寝る準備しに行こう。父さん、とりあえず病院の使ってもいいよね。
おう、この前干してからまだ使ってないやつがあったろ。あれ使え。あとシーツも。
分かってるって。ああ、そうだ。ねえ、うきちゃん、お風呂も一緒に入らない？はい。だからはいじゃないでしょ。言っとくけど、ユウは別だからね。
わかってるよ。
ゆいのやつ、随分とはしゃいでるな。
そうね。でもわかるわ。やっぱりお友達っていいものよ。
Yui took Uki and Yuto out of the room.
クルスは大丈夫か？
どうして？
ほら、食費とかいろんな世話とか一人分増えるだろ。
世話は平気よ。うきちゃんはいろいろ手伝ってくれるって言うし、むしろ楽になるくらい。食費とかはまあ父さんが頑張ってくれれば。
おお、任せとけ。ちょっとトイレに。
Dad quickly ran out of the room to escape Kurusu's gaze. Who's in charge here again? The answer's obvious. She chuckled, but there was a kindness in her laugh. We all know who's in charge here. How is Miyashiro? Completely awakened. Shall I do it? More. More? Yes, more. More suffering, more regrets, more pain, more agony, whatever it said. As you wish. Who is Max Caddy? And who is Amy? Who are these people? Also, he said that Miyashiro is completely awakened, but is that... Like, he still can't manifest the D-Sword, like, physically. So I wonder if that... Like, is he fully awakened? I'd say he's mostly awakened. I don't know how relevant that is, but... Who are these people? Sunday. Arimura, Uki, and I got a full medical check at a hospital run by a friend of my dad's, just like Shinjo had suggested. Now the numbers, brainwaves, electrocardiographs, MRIs, and other images were lined up on Dad's computer screen. Of course, as a complete amateur, I had no idea what any of it meant. Kunosada was talking to my dad as if she were a colleague, rather than addressing him as the much older man that he was.
おかしなものって何ですか？ただでさえこんな検査されてムカついてるのに。しかも今日って友達と約束あったんですよ。女子同士って一度断ると後々面倒なんですけど。
Arimura put her hands on her hips and complained. Uki, for her part, looked scared. She was hiding behind me and trying to stay out of Kunosato's sight.
素人は黙ってろ。邪魔だ。
はあ？冗談じゃないですよ。ここでちゃんと言っとかないと、この先どんな実験をされるか分かったもんじゃありませんからね。
そういうことを言うど素人が一番腹が立つ。
なあ有村さん、久野里さん、そうやって一日中喧嘩してて疲れないか？
Shinjo sighed like he always did. Arimura's eyes narrowed as she glared at Kunosato, who just laughed.
で、佐久間先生、結果はどうでした？
分かったことがあればなるべく早くお願いします。できればこの後買い物に行きたいんで。
ああ、そうするよ。まずウキちゃんの成長阻害因子に関してだが、これはすぐにはわからん。染色体からホルモンの分泌異常まで詳しい結果が出るには時間がかかる。で、タクルと有村さんに関しては体はどこにも異常なし、どの臓器もすこぶる健康だ。ただしタクルは食事のバランスが明らかに悪い。特定の栄養素が欠乏してる。これはののによーく言っとくからな。
No!
有村さんは少し甘いものや油を控えた方がいい。
Worst case scenario.
ジャンクフードもやめること。このままだと確実にメタボへ一直線だ。
げ
体のことは別にいい。脳はどうなんだ？
ああ、これが MRI だが。
Brains are a part of the body, genius. Dad clicked on one of the images, which displayed images of the human brain. Arimura must have found the sights of her own brain creepy because she looked away. Uki didn't seem to know what it was and stared out from behind me, confused. Kunosato clicked through the images slowly, checking each little part in turn, but then finally tossed it away.
3人ともネガティブだな。
ああ、ネガティブだよ。
ネガティブ？嘘、頭悪いってことですか？
Arimura staggered back as if she'd been giving some kind of shocking news.
確かに頭が悪いな。バカすぎる。
そんな。
To be fair, she did kind of walk right into that one.
いやいや、そういう意味じゃないから。
Dad chuckled a little.
久野里君、君は聞いていた以上に人が悪いね。
Mean is not the correct word. Psychotic is the
ネガティ
word.
ブの意味もわからないようなやつはバカと断じていいはずだが。
こいつは新庄君の気苦労もわかるね。
でしょ
Shinjo gave Dad a tired smile.
安心していい、有村さん。医学の世界ではネガティブは陰性って意味だ。つまりおかしな症状は出ていないということだよ。
え？
君の脳は至って正常ってことさ。
なんだ、びっくりした。
Arimura sighed with relief, for once acting like a girl her age. Lately, I finally understood that this was who she really was. She had once told me before that she was always trying to be the person that the people around her wanted her to be.
ギガロマニアックスと脳の肥大化の間には結局因果関係はないのか。
少なくともタクルたちに異常は見られない。君の言うそのギガロなんとかとの関連性は自分で判断してくれ。
Gigolo whatsits. Kunosato frowned and thought.
でも一連の殺人事件の犠牲者には特徴があった。被害者の脳に同一の症状が見受けられた。
Kunosato showed Dad her tablet computer. It had several brains on it that weren't ours. Arimura looked away again.
これを見ればわかるだろう。どれも大脳新皮質が肥大化している。
言われれば確かに。
Dad whispered as he looked at the tablet.
肥大化？大きくなってるってこと？
まあな。
およそ 1.2 倍といったところか。そこで今回お前たちの脳に同様の症状があるのか見せてもらったわけだが、結果はネガティブだった。お前たちの脳は通常の人間と変わらない。
つまり被害者にだけ脳を肥大化させる特別な何かが起こった。
さあそれはどうだろうな。この程度なら日常生活に支障のあるレベルじゃない。知性や知能にも影響はないだろう。本人も気づいてなかったんじゃないか。
つまりもともとそういう脳をしていたのか、死の間際に異常をきたしたのか、あるいは脳に異常をきたしたせいで死んだのか、断定はできないということですか。
Dad looked at the tablet and nodded.
そういうことだね。
いずれにせよ考察のためのデータが乏しすぎる。せめてあと 2,3 に被害者が出てくれればいいんだが。
だからそういうことを口にするのはやめろ。
Shinjo treated it like a joke, but her face was completely serious and terrifying.
っていうか、つまり今日の私たちの検査はあんまり意味がなかったってことですか？冗談じゃないんですけど。
いや、そんなことはないさ。有村さんがすこぶる健康で脳にも異常なしって分かっただけでも収穫じゃないか。
Shinjo tried his best to make her feel better, but
私に向かって心にもないこと言っても無駄ですよ。これだから有村は厄介だって思いましたね、今。
そんなことあるわけ。
Shinjo gave up and lowered his head.
すまん。
ああ、せっかくの休みが潰れちゃった。私そろそろ行きますね。
Arimura grabbed her bag and tried to leave.
ちょっと待て。
No, go away. But she turned around at the door when Kunosato stopped her.
何ですか？
最後にもう一つ手伝え。お前の能力が必要だ。
嫌です。
だから久野里さん、物には頼み方というものが。
Treating her like a 5-year-old. But Kunosato ignored him. Of course she did.
山添雨季の能力についてちゃんと聞いておきたい。
Uki shivered and hid behind me. Dad saw her and frowned in a way only I could notice. Then he said, "I'm gonna hit the restroom," and walked past Arimura out the door. On the way out, he whispered to me,
俺は向こうへ行ってるわ。ちょ 超能力なんて話は医者の領分じゃねえ。聞いてるだけでこっちの頭が変になりそうだ。
After Dad left, Kunosato looked at tiny Uki with cold eyes.
山添、お前自身にもよく分かっていないようだが、とりあえず知っていることだけでいい。
Who let her come with? Her harsh tone only scared Uki more, but I looked at her and nodded, and she tried her best to work up the courage.
私はその誰かが心に描いたものを形にしてしまうみたいなんです。
誰かが心に描いたもの？
それは誰の思考でもか？
私の近くにいる人です。
形というのはつまり実体化させるということだな。例えばここにあるコインを私が思い描いたら。
Kunosato took out a penny and showed it to Uki.
そういうものの場合もありますし、そうじゃないものもあります。
そうじゃないものっていうと？
何と言えばいいのかわからないですが、例えば状態を
状態？
綺麗になりたいとか、こうなってほしいとか。
それが現実になるっていうのか？
現実なんでしょうか。私にもよくわかりません。
それは今やろうと思ってできるものなのか？
いえ、意識してできるわけではないです。
どうだ有村。
Kunosato looked over, but Arimura just turned her head.
はいはい、その子嘘はついてませんよ。全部本当みたいです。
無意識のうちに他人の思考や願望をリアルブートしてしまうということだな。
なるほど。それならこの前フリージアから姿を消した方法も説明がつく。百瀬さんの思考がリアルブートされてしまったわけか。
So her power could only real boot other people's thoughts and wishes, not her own? It was like her own life. She had no hopes of her own, and she only lived her life for the sake of others. In a way, it was a very sad power.
好むと好まざるとに関わらず能力を発動してしまうという点では、そこにいる有村ひなえと同じ部類だ。能力自体は大したものだが、不便なものだ。
不便で悪かったですね。
で、それはいつからだ、山添。いつからそんな能力を身につけたのかと聞いている。地下施設での実験中にか？
いえ、私は劣等生でしたから。
ならいつだ？
多分渋谷の地震の後からだと。
やはりな。
やはりってのは？
こいつらの話と、あとあんたが調べた被害者たちの過去、それらを総合して考えると、能力に目覚めたと思われる時期がほぼ同じだ。
あの地震が原因だってのか？
まだ仮説だがな。
Kunosato started to type something into her tablet.
待ってくれ。地震なんてどこでも頻繁に起こってる。その度にギガロマニアックスが生まれてたらキリがないじゃないか。
いや、私が言っているのは地震そのものじゃない。
あ
の時不可思議な現象が渋谷で観測されたのを覚えているか？
Something strange? I did remember, actually.
もしかしてあの白い光ですか？
Kunosato nodded. That white light. The white light that had covered us right after the Shibuya earthquake. There were a lot of rumors about it, including one that said it was plasma caused by the earthquake. But I'd heard they still didn't know what it really was.
驚いたな。久野里さんが陰謀論者だとは思わなかった。
陰謀論ってまさか一時期流行したあれですか？
I was talking about a certain rumor that had gone around right after the earthquake. The rumor said that the quake was caused by a secret tectonic weapon experiment, a joint project between the US and Japan that might have gone awry, and that the mysterious light was caused by its explosion. And that Chaos Child Syndrome, which was believed to be a form of PTSD, might actually be caused by the materials used in that weapon. The rumor was popular on 8channel for a while, but people quickly got bored with it. By the time I'd woken up from my coma, no one was talking about it anymore. No, it would be more accurate to say that instead of people getting bored, someone had done their best to erase all traces of it. At the time, I'd found this strange, and started looking into it outside of the internet. Despite the large magnitude of the quake, there'd been no aftershocks afterward. All the damage had been concentrated in Shibuya, and the epicenter had been observed to be far too shallow. Despite all this, not a single scientist was speaking up. Whenever someone raised even the smallest doubt, they were quickly shouted down as an idiot conspiracy theorist.
ただの陰謀論だったらいいのだがな。
というと？
全ての元凶はあの光自体にあるのではないかと私は考えている。地震はその副次的なものに過ぎない。
本気で言ってるのか？じゃあ君は光の正体を何だと思ってるんだ？
それが分かれば苦労しない。ただ何者かの手によって引き起こされたものだと私は確信している。
すいません。そういうのは後でやってください。私は早く事件を解決してくれればそれでいいんで。
Arimura saw that Shinjo and Kunosada were about to start arguing and readjusted her tote bag on her shoulder.
私の仕事はもう終わりですよね。じゃあさようなら。宮代先輩たちもまた学校で。
ああ、それじゃあな。
ウキもまたね。てかもっと元気出せよ。
She patted Uki lightly on the head and left the examination room. Uki softly whispered, "Yes, ma'am," as she watched her go. I wonder what Uki's wish would be. Like, what wish would give you the power to, like, specifically fulfill other people's wishes or desires? Like, what? I'm curious what that would have been like. I mean, I guess her whole thing is she just wanted to help everybody else, so I guess that makes sense. Anyways, after that, Kunosato began to mumble to herself as she started to look at her data on Dad's PC. There was a different look in her eyes than any I'd seen before. To be honest, she looked a little crazy. Only now does she look a little crazy. Only at this particular moment. It wasn't like a mad scientist. No, those are fun. We like those. It was as if she was concealing some dark expression. Dark obsession. I can read. Dark obsession. I'd seen those eyes somewhere before. Where was it? I remembered and shivered.
あのパイロキネシスト、南沢千里かもしれないあの女の目にそっくりだ。
They were the eyes of someone bent on revenge and consumed by hatred and rage. The Shibuya earthquake and the strange light, and the relationship they had with our powers. I rolled around in my bed, thinking about everything that had happened. And then I thought back to the crazy look in Kunosato's eyes. She looked just like the pyrokinetic.
復讐か。
Did Senri Minamisawa hate me for what I'd done that day? Did she still hate me even now?
そんなバカな。子供の頃の話だぞ。いくらなんでもそんな昔のことで。
I mean, you blamed yourself too, so I like, and hey, you know, these things aren't exactly rational. I tried to say it aloud to convince myself, but that pyrokinetic wasn't behaving like a normal person. It was hard to think she was sane. She was a beast, an animal without a conscience that was stalking the streets of Shibuya with bared fangs. At least, that's how she had seemed to me. And the terrifying words she'd said when she saw me. She looked at me and said, I found you.
結局僕は知らないうちに自分の命をわざわざ危険にさらすような事件に首を突っ込んでしまってたのか。
The more I thought about it, the more my blood began to run cold. If I'd known this was going to happen, I would have just listened to Kurusu to begin with.
って何を弱気になってんだ。
I sat up on the bed. That's right, I had my power. Even if that woman was Senri Minamisawa, and she was trying to kill me out of revenge, I wouldn't just have to sit there and let her.
ただ
What if she attacked me when I was with Kurusu? And what if things got so dangerous that I couldn't protect my own life, or Kurusu's, without killing her? Could I kill Senri Minamisawa right in front of Kurusu? I almost leapt up at the sudden noise. The sound was from my new smartphone. I'd finally gotten a new one before I went to the hospital today. I'd totally forgotten. I remembered how Ito had gotten a call from my old phone after I'd lost it, and hesitated a little. I looked at the screen, trembling. Caller, Sarika Onoe.
なんだ尾上か。
That is a really annoying
もし
ringtone.
もし。
I like this theme.
どうしたんだよ。
もしかしてご機嫌斜め？今日の検査で何かあった？
そういうわけじゃないけど。
ダメだよ、ごまかしても。そういう声の時のタクはだいたい悩んでる時なんだから。
Evidently, it wasn't just Kurusu and Arimura who could tell when I was lying.
で、何を悩んでたの？
Maybe you're just a really bad liar, my guy. I wasn't sure if I should tell her, but it was Sarika I was talking to after all. I told her everything I'd been thinking about.
白い光？
あの時尾上も僕と一緒にいたよな。何か覚えてないか。
それがね、私倒れて気絶しちゃってたから光とか見てないんだ。ほら、タクが病院まで運んでくれたでしょ？
あ、そういえばそうだったな。
I could still remember how Sarika had felt when I carried her on my back. Until then, I hadn't really treated her any differently than any other boy, but at some point, she'd started to grow into a woman. When I carried her on my back, I was surprised. That was what a girl felt like.
あの時はごめんね。ありがとう。
今さらなんだよ。僕とお前の仲だろ。
幼馴染ってやっぱりいいね。
Sarika sounded happy, but the tone of her voice quickly dropped.
あ、でも、のんちゃんの幼馴染のあの子は、のんちゃんやタクを悩ませてるんだよね。困ったね。
お前も気をつけろよ。昔地下施設で南沢千里を目撃したのは僕だけじゃないんだからな。
大丈夫だよ。きっとタクが守ってくれるから。
え？
あれ？もしかして守ってくれないの？
いや、そういうわけじゃない。ただ、その。
I fell silent, but I could tell that Sarika was nodding to herself on the other side of the phone.
ああ、そっか。それで迷ってるんだね。
And then, even though I hadn't said anything, she seemed to realize my problem. Could I kill someone if it meant saving someone?
でもね、タク。多分のんちゃんなら相手が幼馴染でも親友でも タクを守るためにためらわないでやっつけると思うんだ。もちろん私もだよ。タクのためならどんなことでもするし、誰にも負けないと思う。絶対に。
尾上。
タクはどうかな。
Maybe she was right. Kurusu would probably kill her friend if it was the only way to protect us.
でもそんなことクルスにさせていいわけない。
If that woman really was Senri Minamisawa, it wasn't Kurusu who needed to do it. It was me, right? That's right. That was the only way to overcome my past trauma, too.
あ、でも今日は18日だよね。
That's a concerning way to look at it.
どうしたいきなり。
Following Serika's conversations was as impossible as ever.
あのね、次の事件はすぐには起きないんじゃないかなって。
すぐに起きない？
I looked at the calendar and then realized
次は23日か。
these killings were following the New Generation madness. The next murder would be on the 23rd. After that would be Yummy Hand on October 28th and Dokyun Puzzle on the 4th of November. If we could get through the 23rd, we'd be safe for a while.
だからそれまでは安全かも。
とはいえ23日になったら24時間逃げ回らなきゃいけないんだよな。
だったらその日はみんなで一緒にいようよ。ずっと。いくら恨みを持ってるからってみんなのいる場所に堂々と出てくるなんてできないんじゃないかな。
なるほど。やっぱりそういう作戦しかないか。
If we could avoid the murderer that way, we'd win.
部活のみんなにも協力してもらって深夜までやってるお店に入っちゃうとか、佐久間先生さえ許してくれれば青葉寮で合宿してもいいかも。
尾上、お前意外と考えてるんだな。
I'm telling you, she's the plan maker. She's the primary mover here. She makes everything happen.
なんかすっごく褒められちゃった。
Just straight up the backbone of the whole club. No, it's not. Wait, what did she say? It's not a compliment at all. But whenever I was in trouble or worried about something, Serika had always been there to listen. She was one of the few people who really understood me. Of course, I was too embarrassed to tell her that, and I had no plans to ever do so.
それじゃあタク、おやすみ。いい夢見てね。
ああ、おやすみ。
I hung up, then looked at the calendar on the wall again.
10月23日。犯人はどう動き、どんな犯罪を犯すんだろう。それは本当に何らかのメッセージなんだろうか。そして狙われているのはこの僕か、それとも。
Just like we'd expected, nothing happened over the next few days. There was no sign of the woman and no new arson cases, which meant no news about the case. For my part, I was trying to figure out how to use my power to protect everyone, instead of just screwing around like I had before. You gotta figure out how to draw that sword, my guy. And then the day was upon us. We're already at the 23rd? Alright.
とりあえず今のところは何もなしか。
ああ。
よかったっすね、宮代先輩。これもわざわざひなえちゃんが付き合ってあげてるおかげっすよ。感謝の印として今度専属屋のマンゴーフルーツパフェごちそうしてくださいね。
何言ってんだ。お前だって狙われてるかもしれないだろ。お互い様ってやつだ。
うわー、ドケチ。ちょっとみんな気を抜くのが早すぎるわ。問題はこれからなんだから。
Nothing had happened during school. We'd made sure that nobody was alone during break periods, and it had paid off. Oh, she's here too.
なんだ山添。
私も一緒にここにいてよかったんでしょうか。学園の生徒でもないのに。
That was exactly my question. When I saw her, I was like, weird.
今日は特別だ。君だって能力者なんだから狙われないとも限らないだろ。
Well, I mean, that obviously that's why she's here, but I think she's asking if it's like against the
そういう
rules.
こと。今日が無事に終わるまで絶対に私たちと離れてはダメよ。
はい。
Yes, ma'am. Uki had seemed uncomfortable in this new environment all day.
で、これからどうすんだ？
そろそろ学校も人が少なくなるし、移動した方がいいわね。
渋谷で遅くまで開いている店へ行こう。悪いけどみんなも付き合ってくれるか？
しょうがないっすね。その代わり宮代先輩のおごりでよろしく。
有村、他のメンバーはともかくお前は割り勘だ。
先輩ひどい。鬼、悪魔。
Call me whenever you want.
それでどこ行くの？
カラオケとか？
できれば懐的に優しいところにしてくれ。
だとすると行き先はいつものあそこだね。
よう来たの。ゆるりと過ごしてゆくがよい。
I'm telling you, there's something with this chick. I don't know what it is. Good, bad, I don't know. Something's up with her.
どうも。
Something
お主たち
something ain't right.
好きな席に座ってよいぞ。
We chose a seat by the window with a good view. Cafe Lax took over a whole floor of a classy two-story building near Shibuya's residential district. With a window seat, we could see all around the building, and we'd spot that pyrokinetic Senri Minamisawa, if that's who she was, immediately.
閉店までここにいられるね。そのためにはたくさん注文しなきゃ。すみません。
もう一度確認しとくぞ。有村自腹だからな。
どれ、注文は決まったのか？忙しいからさっさとオーダーするように。
あの店員さん、忙しいなら私もお店の手伝いをしますので。
Oh.
は？
That face. Look at her face.
こらこら山添。
What?
客は手伝わなくていいんだからな。ていうか手伝っちゃダメだからな。
Oh, that's so funny.
そうなんですか？
そうなんです。
あ、私はここからここまで全部お願いします。
だから有村、どさくさに紛れてそういう注文するな。お前には絶対におごらないからな。お前、何うなってんだよ。
さっき食べたシュークリームのクリームが髪についちゃって。
How? How does that happen? How could she pull that off with hair that length? I don't know. Apparently when I was like 8, I got birthday cake on my back. So, you know, it gets weirder, I suppose.
花ってば大きなあくび。
伊藤もだ。いくらなんでも気を抜きすぎだろ。
それにお行儀が悪いわよ。
んなこと言ったってしょうがないだろ。何時間もただだらっとしてるだけなんだから。
We'd been at Cafe Lax for 4 hours already. At first, everyone had been tense and alert, but it seemed we were starting to hit our limits. Arimura and I seemed to be relaxing a little. If we were alone, we would have been afraid, but now we were surrounded by our friends. And if you added in the waitress and the other customers, there were even more people here now. I couldn't imagine someone just barging in and attacking.
おいこら、お主ら。
You people. The waitress had walked over at some point while I was looking out the window and was standing next to me.
一体何時間粘るつもりじゃ。これ以上注文せんのならいい加減。ああ、します、注文。メニューください。
And I guess we had to order extra after all. It was only natural, but it was putting a big dent in my budget for the month.
おれ、メニューじゃ。ありがとうございます。タク、何頼む？
Serica took the menu and handed it to me.
そうだな。なるべく安いもの。安いもの。
As I flipped through the menu, I saw...
Huh?
Oh my god. Stickers! That's a sumo sticker. Oh, that's one of the real ones too. No. I felt horribly dizzy and my eyes started to go blurry. I felt bad. It hurt to breathe. The 11th Rorschach, which had tortured Arimura and I on the night we were attacked by the pyrokinetic, was right in front of me. Everything started to go dim. Stay strong. Don't lose it. I think we're already in it. Just gotta ride it out, I guess. Don't lose it. Okay, I managed to get a hold of myself. Alright, no crazy, nothing too crazy that happened there. That's nice, unless we're still in it, in which case... We're still in it, okay. What? Where did everybody go? That made no sense. How? Where?
Kazuki, Arimura, Yamazoe.
They were gone. Not only my friends, but even the waitress had disappeared. Everybody was gone. I called out to the back of the cafe, but there was no sign that anyone was there. The sound. All the sound had disappeared from the world. The music that had been playing in the cafe was gone, and so were the sounds of the cars that had sometimes passed by on the road. There was nothing but strange silence and dark gloom. I could only hear one thing. That terrifying sound. She was getting closer. The footsteps were coming up the stairs to the cafe. Shivering with fear, I forced myself to quietly open the door to the cafe, then snuck out onto the landing. Trembling, I looked down the stairs to the first floor. And there I saw... This ain't good. Our eyes met. Our eyes met for an instant. I saw those eyes, like cold fire, looking up at me from beneath the hair that covered her whole face. I knew it. That was... As if she could sense my fear. Senri Minamisawa looked at me and smiled. was the smile of a beast that had found its prey. Is this not? Is this like actually for realsies? It's so hard to tell sometimes. God damn it. I gritted my teeth to keep from screaming and ran back into the cafe. I closed the door as quietly as I could. Also, the name of the chapter was Betrayal. That doesn't bode well. I'm scared. I'm scared. I'm so scared. She's going to kill me. 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 Senri Minamisawa is going to kill me. I tried to scream for help, but my voice got caught in my throat. No, even if I'd been able to yell, no one was there to help me. Kurusu was gone. Sarika was gone. So were Ito, Arimura, Kazuki, and Uki. Even the waitress had disappeared. The lighting seemed to have turned a faded yellow, too. The cafe was much darker than usual. I was too scared to speak or do anything except slowly move backward from the door. Finally, I hit the wall and found myself with nowhere to run. I could knock her flames away again. I tried desperately to psych myself up for the fight. But I couldn't see it. The D-sword wouldn't appear. No matter how much I tried to concentrate, the terror won out, and the D-sword refused to appear. Past the entrance to the cafe, I could hear the loud clicking of a heel against the floor, and the sound of a leg sliding along the ground. She was bringing me a merciless death. I looked around and saw a door on the other side of the kitchen. It was the employee bathroom. I flung myself away from the wall, ripped open the door, and went inside. Then I locked the door with trembling hands. I'm sure this will go swimmingly. There were no windows in the bathroom. I would certainly hope not. I had run inside without even bothering to turn on the lights, so it was pitch black. In that cramped, enclosed space, my heart started to pound fast and my breathing became heavy. I feel like the lights are going to turn on and something horrifying is going to be in here. She was going to hear me. I needed to be quiet. I put my hand over my mouth to stifle the sound. It hurt to breathe, but if I couldn't be quiet, she'd find me and kill me. Senri Minamisawa's footsteps finally reached this floor, and then she stopped suddenly, and there was an eerie silence. I could almost sense somehow that she was looking for me. Just go away. Leave me alone. I prayed, but it was a waste of time. She came inside the cafe. The footsteps started again. Slowly, slowly. The woman slowly moved around the cafe. You better pay for that. I could hear her dragging her leg from one side of the cafe to the other, as if she was toying with me. Each time she moved, she knocked glasses and cups to the floor, where they shattered. All I could do was try not to scream. I remembered all the horrible ways the other psychics had died. Don't look at me, leaky noise, revolving dead, Gotsuan death. Is that going to happen to me too? No, I don't want to die like that. How much time had passed after that? Suddenly, Senri Minamisawa's footsteps started to get farther and farther away. I couldn't tell from here, but it felt like she might be about to leave. I concentrated as hard as I could on listening to those eerie footsteps. I could hear a door open and close, and then that awful dragging sound again, this time going down the stairs. And soon, there was no sound at all. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I panted in relief. Now I wouldn't die in the new generation mad... Oh, God. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. It was so utterly unexpected that I couldn't stop myself from screaming. The knocking stopped for an instant. I could sense that someone was looking at me from the other side of the flimsy door. The knocking started again. And slowly but steadily it continued. The interval between each knock was identical and mechanical. Knock, 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 knock. I tried to get as far away from the door as I could. But the bathroom was tiny and there was nowhere to run. Two in fisticuffs? I won't let her just kill me. I'll catch her my damned self. Could I beat a pyrokinetic with my bare hands? The thought flashed through my mind for an instant. But I didn't think I could take the terror anymore. I was at my limit. I screamed, unlocked the door, and slammed into it as hard as I could. The bathroom door opened with a bang. Overcome with terror, I screamed and slammed into the person in front of me to the floor. But hey, everybody's back, isn't that cool? At the last minute, someone grabbed my head from the side. I smelled a pleasant scent that I knew well. Kurusu was beside me, holding me. And... The person I had knocked to the floor was Sarika. Any more and I would have hurt her.
宮代先輩、すっげえ大胆。こんな場所でセリの初めてを奪おうとするなんて。
違う。そんなことより。
I shook off Kurusu's hand and stood up.
あの女は。
あの女？
Everyone looked confused. Erica stood up, rubbed her butt, and started to look around the room.
あの女って誰？
だから今ここにいたろ。僕を殺そうとして。っていうか、お前らこそ今までどこにいたんだよ。
あ？どこって、ずっとここにいたぞ。
Ito stood up from the sofa on the window. Yamazoe and Kazuki were sitting next to him, with surprised looks on their faces.
なあ、お主ら、少しばかり騒がしいの。これ以上迷惑になるようなら、即刻出て行ってもらうが。
Even the waitress was here too.
そんな。
It was the sticker, my guy.
確かに僕は襲われたんだ。しかも店には誰もいなくて。
But was the sticker actually there? Like, was that just a dream?
いや、違う。夢なんかじゃない。何もかもリアルだった。
I could still remember the sound of her leg dragging, and the sound of the knocking at the door. Just thinking of them made me shiver.
ってことは、これもあの女の南沢千里の能力なのか。偽のカフェラックスを作り出し、僕だけを閉じ込めて。
I thought she was just a pyrokinetic. Could she do that as well?
いや、それとも彼女の手助けをしている能力者がいるのか。
Either way, the possibility we discussed at the newspaper club meeting was right, and in a bad way.
ちょっと大丈夫タクル。ひどい汗よ。
Kurusu took out a handkerchief from her pocket and started to gently wipe the sweat off my forehead. But suddenly her hand stopped. She looked at me, her face pale.
タクル、あなた、目から血が。
Excuse? I put my hands up to my eyes, surprised. When I tried to rub them, I felt something slick. When I looked at my hands, they were bright red. I could see my blood on her handkerchief too. Had I been so scared and tense that the blood vessels around my eyes had burst?
どうしたのそれ？
大丈夫か宮代。
父さんに見てもらわなきゃ。
That's not good. Kurusu and Sarika tried to drag me out of the cafe. I could see Ito, Arimura, Kazuki, and Uki in the corner of my eye, trying to figure out what to do. I turned to them and said,
伊藤、有村、和樹、山添、お前たちも一緒に。
あ、はい。私もいいんですか？こんな時間に？
遠慮なんかしてる場合じゃない。能力者がターゲットにされてるのは間違いないんだ。今日が終わるまでとにかく離れちゃダメだ。
We left Cafe Lax and headed for Aoba Clinic.
特に目に異常はねえな。角膜も綺麗なもんだし、血圧もほぼ正常と。
Dad nodded as he looked at me.
頭痛はするか？体のどこかが痺れるとかは？
特には。
視界の一部が欠けてたり、狭くなったりもしてないな？
うん。
そっか。なら大丈夫だ。
本当に？もっとよく見て。
Kurusu was sitting next to me, worried.
さっきからそればっかだな、お前。
だって。
まぶたの裏に血管があって、稀にそれが切れることがある。ひどい緊張や興奮をして力が入ったり、踏ん張ったりするとな。覚えがないか、タグル。
I remembered the attack at Cafe Lax and shivered. But I nodded before Dad could see.
だろ？それが原因だよ。心配ない。
Dad called up my chart on the computer, the same one he'd been using since I was in a coma. He started to type something.
おいおい、ノーノー。そんなおっかない顔で睨むなって。
タクルに何かあったらどうする気？
わかったわかった。
Dad stopped typing and opened up another page on the chart.
タクル、紹介状書いてやるから、明日また頭の中の写真撮ってこい。
でも。
いいから行けって。可愛い娘が怒って、口聞いてくれなくなったら困るんだよ。
うん。
That's ridiculous. Dad wrote me another referral to the same hospital as before, which was finally enough to satisfy Nono.
いや、そうだ、ノノ。
ん？
お前、自分もまだ病み上がりだってこと忘れんなよ。
あ、うん。そうね。ごめんなさい。
分かってりゃいい。
Dad smiled. Caruso and I thanked Dad, and then went up to the dining room where the rest of the group was waiting.
ああ、ウキ。私アップルティー。
I don't buy that there's just nothing gonna happen today. Like who's gonna die? I don't think it's gonna be any of these guys. Somebody gonna die. Like
私も。
わかりました。伊藤さんは？
コーヒー、ブラックで。
when we got to the dining room, Uki was running around getting drinks for everyone. I looked at the clock and it was almost 11 p.m. It was just one more hour until October 23rd was over.
で、さっき何があったのかちゃんと説明してくれるんですよね、宮代先輩。
Arimura looked at me as she sipped her apple tea. She had the same joking voice she used at school, but her eyes were serious. She seemed to have come up with her own ideas on what might have happened to me, and her eyes were as gloomy as they were when we first met.
話すよ。例のパイロキネシストのことだから。
Hold on. Weren't her eyes also bleeding when, like, at the hotel when they first met? Is that just a coincidence? Coincidence? I think not.
南沢千里。
I glanced at Kurusu just for a second. I thought she wouldn't want to hear that her old friend might be a serial killer.
クルス、もし嫌なら。
I mean, she seems pretty level-headed about this overall.
自分の部屋に戻っててくれ。
Considering the
父さんがユイの
circumstances.
ところへ行っててもいいし。
うん。ちゃんと聞かせて。
クルス。
聞きたいの。だからここにいる。
そっか。じゃあ。
I sat down in a chair at the dinner table, and after a moment's hesitation, slowly began to describe what happened to me at Cafe Lax. As I talked, the terror started to come back to me, and my hands were soon covered in nasty sweat. I didn't want to look bad in front of everyone, but I couldn't stop my voice from shaking.
それでその後は知っての通りだ。ドアを飛び出したら外はいつも通りのカフェに戻ってた。
There was silence for a moment after I finished. Arimura especially seemed to be lost in thought. That was, of course, because Senri Minamisawa was probably after me, her, or Uki.
殺されてたまるか。
She whispered in a low voice and suddenly struck her hand out into the air. Stuck her hand. Reading.
おい。
Ooh. Yamazoe and I moved away, surprised. Arimura had suddenly drawn her D sword.
お前、何を。
決まってるでしょ。武器ですよ。
武器。
あんたも出せるんだよね、ウキ。もしあいつが現れたら戦う。手伝いなさい。
Have we seen Uki's D sword? I want to see it.
私そん
いいから早く。
I want to see it. Uki tried to shake her head no, but when Arimura glared at her threateningly, she bit her lip. Then she reached out her hand. That's so cool. It's like a Death Knight sword. Jesus Christ. A giant sword appeared in her hand too.
宮代先輩も早く。
It's got like a little heart there. That's so cool.
そんなこと急に言われても、どうやって抜いたらいいかわからないんだそれ。
役に立ちませんね。
Hey, fuck you. I could hear how annoyed she was. It had been a long time since I'd seen her act this cold.
ねえ、何？どうしたの？
一体何の話してんだよ。
The others couldn't see the D sword. All they saw was Uki and I freaking out.
私たちこの前、南沢千里に襲われました。そして今日も宮代先輩が。こんなのもう我慢できない。だから。
Arimura looked at the sword in her hands and cackled.
この手で事件を終わらせてやります。南沢千里を殺して。ちょっと待って。
I think you're jumping all sorts of conclusions here. Everyone turned to look at Kurusu. She probably knew that she was getting too emotional about the situation because she was hesitating more than I'd ever seen before.
あのね、千里が犯人って、本当のことなの？
証拠はまだあの ID カードと僕らの証言しかない。けど
慰霊碑にはあの子の名前がちゃんとあるのよ。
それは何かのミスじゃないですか。A1 東京総合病院のデータでは行方不明になっていたんですよね。
けど私見たんだもの。私の目の前で千里は瓦礫に潰されて。
That's new. She must have been remembering something painful. She put her hands to her chest and her nails dug in deep. But then Arimura raised her eyebrows so high that I could see it from here. She's not lying.
クルス先輩。どうして嘘をつくんですか？
Oh, she is lying. Never mind. I lied.
え？
I was wrong. Shocked, I glanced at them, from one to the other. Arimura was staring at Kurusu with suspicious eyes. I was way off. But Kurusu's expression remained unchanged, to the point where it almost seemed unnatural.
クルス先輩の今の言葉は嘘です。
Arimura's power let her tell when someone was lying. In other words, Kurusu was absolutely lying right now. But Kurusu looked Arimura dead in the eyes as she spoke.
嘘なんかじゃないわ。
いいえ、先輩は南沢千里が死んだところを見ていません。
あなたの能力というのがどのくらい正確なのか私は知らない。けれど彼女はもうこの世にはいないわ。
そう信じたいだけじゃないんですか？あるいは南沢千里が実は生きているのを知っているとか。
The two of them glared at each other.
もし仮に。
はい。
仮に千里が生き延びていたとしても、あの子に殺人なんてできるはずがない。
Kurusu's voice took on a sorrowful note.
千里はとっても臆病な子だった。小さな虫を殺すこともできないくらい気が弱くて、何かあるとすぐに泣きべそをかいて、だからいつも誰かの後をついて回っていたわ。 もちろん暴力なんて嫌いだったし、血を見るのすら苦手だった。そんな千里が猟奇殺人なんて、私にはどうしても納得がいかない。ありえないわ。
I mean, I imagine the things they did probably changed that a bit. Like,
どうやら今度は本当のことを言っているようですね。
だから
Bruce's voice was rarely this emotional, but she must have realized that nothing she said would matter, so she fell silent.
とにかく千里が犯人じゃないとしたら、タクルたちの憶測は完全に間違ってしまっているわ。真犯人が他にいたらどうする気なの？
それは。
Of course, I thought about that possibility. That there might be multiple killers. That there might be another psychic working with Senri Minamisawa.
でも、だとしても、今日が終わるまでに誰も殺されなければ僕らの勝ち。
Everyone leapt out of their chairs as we heard a scream from downstairs. Was that Yui's voice?
Yui!
Kurusu ran down the stairs. We followed right after her. Whoa. Yui had fallen backwards onto the ground near the front desk. Her face was pale and her jaw was chattering.
お姉ちゃん、ねえ、どうしたの？
ユイ、大丈夫か？ユイ。
Yuto and Dad grabbed her and held her tight, but she was still shaking. The terror had completely consumed her.
何があったの？ユイ。お姉ちゃん、しっかりしなさい。
Kurusu grabbed her by the cheeks and yelled.
私寝ようと思って父さんにお休みの挨拶して。おやすみなさい。父さんも無理しないでもう寝たら？
そう思うんだったらノノに意見しといてくれ。あいつのせいで余計な仕事が一つ増えたんだよ。
ナナ姉はタクル兄のことになると人が変わるから。
違いねえな。じゃおやすみ。
おやすみ。それで私部屋へ戻ろうとして診察室を出たんだけど、その時玄関のドアから音が、ノックの音が。
Okay, that's just a normal knock. That's... At least there's that. That's...
私急患の人かなって思って、それで返事をしたの。すみません、今日の診察は終わりなんです。急患でしたら夜間診療のある病院をご紹介しますけど。どうなさいました？救急車呼んだ方がいいですか？一体何なんですか？いたずらならやめてください。だからやめてください。私ものすごく怖くなって、だけど外見たら。
もう大丈夫。大丈夫よ、ユイ。
So she actually did show up. Kurusu rubbed her head gently, and at last the dam burst and Yui started to cry. Everyone looked at each other, pale, as we listened to her sob. Arimura and I in particular had gone as deathly white as Yui. Knocking. It was the same thing I'd heard at the cafe. It was a different knock, though. It was a normal knock.
やっぱり追いかけてきたんだ。
I could feel my knees shaking. I remembered the knocking and the dragging footsteps I'd heard at the cafe, and my heart began to feel overwhelmed with terror. I felt an impulse to run screaming off into the night. But strangely enough, it was Arimura who gave in before I did. She gritted her teeth so hard I could hear it from where I was standing, and then ran toward the front entrance.
Oi, Arimura!
Hey, don't do that. Don't do that. She yanked open the lock on the door and then flung it open. She ran out into the street, flailing her D-sword.
南沢千里、私はここにいる。くだらない小細工なんかやめて、さっさと殺しに来いよ。
She kept swinging her D-sword at the shadows formed by the streetlights.
私はもう逃げも隠れもしない。殺せるもんなら殺してみろって言ってんだ。
やめろ、Arimura! 何やってるんだよ!
I grabbed Arimura from behind. She'd clearly gone insane. Her D-sword hadn't been real booted yet, so it just slid right through me. If it had been, I wouldn't have survived.
やだ、離して。殺されるのは嫌。
落ち着け。あいつは僕らがパニックになるのを狙ってるんだ。冷静にならなきゃ負けだ。
なんでこんな目に遭わなきゃならないの？能力なんてなければよかった。こんなものさえなければ。
When I saw her, I realized I'd been making a mistake. For a while now, I've thought that I was starting to understand Arimura, but I was wrong. A bratty know-it-all. A normal girl who sometimes got excited and smiled a childlike smile. I was always surprised when she did, but I'd also told myself that's who she really was. But I was wrong. She was a weak little girl whose fate was caught up in events far beyond her control.
そうだ。能力なんてなければ、誰もこんなことに巻き込まれることはなかった。
No one would have been killed, and no one would have been tortured in those experiments in that basement. I hated myself for ever being proud of my powers. Why did they even exist? Who gave me these, and why? Arimura's body was shaking as I held her. And pathetically enough, I was shaking every bit as much.
Oi, Miyashiro! Arimura!
Ito ran up to us as we sat on the side of the road. Serika, Uki, and Kazuki ran after him.
大丈夫か?
なんとか落ち着いた。
I lied so as not to worry them.
それより部屋へ戻ろう。ここにいたら危ない。いつ襲われるか。
And then Ito cut me off and showed me his phone. I flinched away.
まさか、また正体不明の電話がかかってきたのか。
Ito must have guessed what I was thinking because he quickly shook his head.
違う。よく見ろ、Miyashiro.
I stared at the phone. It had the usual wallpaper, the usual apps. There was nothing out of the ordinary.
気がついたか?
尾上、お前のも見せてくれ。
Serika took her phone out of her pocket and showed it to me. It showed the same thing that Ito's did. The present time and date. Did midnight? Did we make it? 12:03 a.m. October 24th. Alright. October 23rd was over.
助かったのか。
Arimura swung her head around and yanked the phone out of Serika's hands. Her fingers were shaking too much to read what it said. She stared at it again and again, and then... The strength drained from her tiny body as she collapsed into me. And then she passed out. October 23rd. No, you lie. It's the 24th now. Stop it. The day of the return of the new generation Oh, I see. And we'd survived it. Okay. But did everyone survive it? I don't buy it. Someone out there died. Someone out there got murdered. Kazuki got into her usual gaming position and stretched. She was about to start playing ESO 2. I chuckled as I opened the lid of my lunchbox. Everything was returning to normal. Inside the lunchbox was a sandwich that Kurusu had made for me. Morning had come. It was a Saturday, but it was the one day of the month we went to school on weekends. We'd gotten some sleep at Aoba dorm, then taken showers and come to school. Yui and Arimuro still hadn't woken up and were staying at Aoba Clinic. But neither of them seemed hurt, and Kurusu and Uki were staying home to take care of them. For my part, I'd skipped out on morning classes to stop by the brain doctor that Dad had referred me to. The results had been the same as Dad had said, no abnormalities in the blood vessels of my brain. When I told Kurusu over the phone, she sounded relieved. I wasn't feeling hungry, but I didn't want to let the sandwich go to waste. I took a little nibble of it as I stared at the board on the wall. The net had been in an uproar last night. No, it still was. But not because something had happened. I guess nothing happened. In fact, the uproar was because nothing had happened. I checked a bunch of different places, TV, radio, and even the newspaper. And nothing had happened on the 23rd that would make you think of the new generation madness. There were all kinds of rumors going around on the net. This included a weird conspiracy theory that the killer had been captured, but because he was the son of a major politician, they couldn't go public with it. But most people thought the return of the new generation madness was over now that nothing had happened on the 23rd.
Oh, Miyashiro! 病院はもういいのか?
ああ、おかげさまで異常なしだってさ。
よかったね。
Ito and Serika were both carrying lunchboxes of their own. Kurusu had made their lunches this morning, just like she'd made mine.
けど、登校するなり部室に直行してランチとか、いいゴミ分だな、おい。
授業は午後からでいいって言われたからさ。それに、マップを見ながらいろいろ考えてみようと思って。
これ以上何もするなって、今朝新庄さんに言われたろ。
When we told Shinjo that there'd been another attack by the person we believed to be Senri Minamisawa, he demanded to know why we hadn't told him sooner. And then he insisted that we never do anything so dangerous again. What do you mean, do anything so like be attacked by a psycho?
でも考えるくらいならいいだろう。
What did they do? I put the lid back on my lunch, having barely eaten any of it at all, and then looked back at the map.
昨日僕たちはカフェラックスにいた。そこで事件が起こった。僕の前に現れたのは以前襲ってきたあの女だった。
Kunosato. I like how they didn't even bother to write her first name. Pyrokinetic.
ところがカフェラックスで僕を襲ったのはパイロキネシスじゃなく 別の能力だった。それは
showed me a delusion of being alone. Read my mind and shared my embarrassing secrets is really funny.
ってことはやっぱり南沢千里は一人で2つの能力を持ってるって推測が正しいのかな。
いや、まだ確証は持てない。別の能力者が協力している可能性を否定できないし。
それで襲われた時の緊張のせいでタクがまぶたの血管を切っちゃって、結局みんなで青葉寮へ移動したんだよね。
ああ、僕はそこで父さんの診察を受けて、その後みんなで23日が過ぎるのを待ってた。
そういえばさ、あの時副部長と有村なんか言い争いとかしてなかったか。なんだったっけ。
言い争い？
あ、そういえば
Nona said she didn't believe the Senri was the killer.
そうそう、のんちゃんがね、南沢千里さんは絶対に犯人じゃないって言ったんだよ。
猟奇殺人なんてできる子じゃないって言ってたな。昔親友だったからわかるって。
でもさ、あの時に有村は副部長が嘘をついてるって指摘したんだよ。あれってどういうことだと思う？
確かあの時有村が嘘だと指摘したのは、
it was a lie that she saw Senri Minamisawa die in the earthquake.
思い出した。クリスは南沢千里が目の前で死ぬのを見たって言ったんだけど、それが嘘だったんだ。つまり死んだところを見てない。
きっとのんちゃんはね、親友だった子が犯人扱いされてるのが許せなかったんだよ。それでとっさに嘘をついちゃったんだと思うんだ。
まあ確かに副部長の気持ちになってみりゃな。
そうだな。やっぱり南沢千里の話題はクリスがいるときは少し気を使った方がいいな。
Stuck a paper up on the board.
そして問題はその後か。
あ
あ、青葉委員の1階でユイが
ドアがノックされるのを聞いたんだよね。
It was the same thing I'd heard at Cafe Lax, that woman's knock. It was a different knock. And Yui had seen a terrifying sight.
僕でさえカフェであれだけ恐怖したんだ。何も知らないユイはさぞかし怖かっただろうな。
うん、かわいそう。
Fortunately, Yui didn't open the door. She'd quickly shut and locked it, and saved us at the last minute. But if she'd opened the door all the way...
いや、待てよ。
I looked up from the map toward the ceiling. Something seemed very wrong.
どうしたのタク？
なんか思い出したのか。
Serika and Ito looked at me confused.
いや、なんか引っかかった。ものすごく大変なことを見落としてる気がする。
Even Kazuki was surprised enough that she turned away from ESO2 to look at me.
大変なこと？
ああ、昨夜はいろんなことがあって、有村がパニクったり、僕も気が動転してて気づかなかったけど。
That's right. What was I just thinking now? If Yui had opened the door...
当然、これまでの事件から考えれば、ユイも被害者に。でも、それって、つまり。
I looked at the map again. I'm gonna be honest. Am I dumb? I'm missing it. I don't see it yet.
前にも話したけど、今回の事件には一つ明らかに共通する特徴があったよな。
っていうと？
それは被害者だ。最初の事件、こっちみんな被害者とその特徴は、次は音漏れタン。被害者とその特徴は、僕が目撃した回転デッド。被害者とその特徴は、そして学園祭で起きたゴッツァンです。被害者とその特徴は、そう、事件のターゲットになっている被害者は全員能力者だ。それ以外は襲われていない。だからこそ僕や有村山沿いはずっと警戒していたわけだし、事実カフェラックスでは僕がターゲットにされた。でもアウバ寮に現れた南沢千里が襲撃しようとしたのは、
Oh, I see what he's getting at. Okay. I mean, yeah. I guess that is weird. In my mind, she would have just gone like past. Yeah, but I guess she would have had to attack Yui. Also, those pictures are adorable.
そう、ユイだ。
I stood up in shock.
まさかそんな。
ゆいちゃんもってこと？
Huh.
マジかよ。
It was far too late for it to make a difference now, but I suddenly felt like a cold pillar of ice was pressed against my back. I was certain that Senri Minamisawa had come to Aoba Clinic in search of me, Arimura, or Uki, and that Yui had only been caught up in it at all because she was unlucky enough to answer the door. That's where my mind was at, too. But what if I was wrong? What if there was a reason she was after Yui? I sighed. It was hard for me to really believe.
これから確かめてくる。あいつが本当に能力者なのかどうか。
Is he gonna show her the sticker?
あ、悪い。
That's pretty mean, but like also, I guess it is a pretty effective way of telling if someone's
あれ
got the power.
タクルに学校は？
早退した。お前のこと気になってさ。
またまた。
Yui slowly sat up from the bed and smiled a tired smile. She must have felt dizzy for a moment because she leaned forward and grabbed her forehead. Her face was still pale, and the IV looked like it was really painful.
いいからそのまま寝てろって。
I hope he's not going to show it to her now, because that's
でも
like wait for her to recover or something.
クレスに言いつけるぞ。
Assuming that's what he's going to do. Maybe not. Those were always the best words to use on Yui. She frowned for a second, but then laid down and pulled up the covers.
有村は？
The other bed in the exam room was empty.
お昼頃新庄さんって刑事さんが来て二人で出かけていった。また後で来るって。
Shinjo was probably asking her about last night.
あいつもう体は大丈夫なのか？
元気だったみたい。
そっか。
タクル兄にね、ありがとうって伝えてくれって。
え？
My eyes went wide as I looked at my foster sister. Arimura said thanks?
何かの聞き間違いだろ。
そんなことないよ。いい人だよ、有村さん。タクル兄にもちゃんと感謝してると思うけど。
聞き間違いじゃなきゃただの気の迷いだな。
I pulled up a stool to Yui's bed and sat down. And then I watched her as she lay under the covers. It might have been the first time I'd looked at her like this, come to think of it. Did she have some kind of power? It just seemed hard to believe. Maybe I was mistaken. I hoped I was. People were saying that the killings were over and that the return of the new generation madness was at its end. But the killer still hadn't been caught. The idea of the killer being after not just me, Arimura, and Uki, but also Yui was too scary to contemplate.
何？どうしたの？
As I tried to figure out the best way to explain things, I heard a very uncomfortable voice. She must have noticed that I was staring at her silently. My sister was looking at me in confusion.
あのな、
ん？
あらタクル、
おかえりなさい。
まだお帰りなさいっていう時間じゃないでしょ。
Kurusu was standing at the door, holding a tray with a bowl of rice porridge. Uki was next to her with a pair of spare pajamas. Kurusu put the tray next to the bed and looked at me, concerned.
学校早退したの？どこか具合でも？
ごめん、そうじゃなくて、ちょっと気になることがあってさ。
気になること？
Even if Yui was a psychic, I still wasn't sure if I should tell Kurusu about it. She'd just worry more. But she cared about her sister, I knew that. It was probably better if she knew everything.
どうすれば確かめられるかな。
How do you phrase that? And then I remembered the method that Kunosato had used on me. I glanced at Uki. She probably wouldn't like it, but it was the only way I could think of.
なあ、ユイ。
Oh, he's gonna show her the damn sticker!
ゆうべのことをあんまり思い出したくないと思うけどさ。有村とそこにいる山添が手に何か持っているのを見なかったか。
That's better. Never mind. No sticker, yay. Kurusu and Uki were shocked too.
何かって？
二人は剣のようなものを持っていたんじゃないか。
剣。
ねえタクル、あなた何を言ってるの？
Kurusu grabbed me by the arm. She couldn't see the D sword herself, but she knew exactly what I was asking.
ユイ、そんなの見てないわよね。
見てない、知らない。
She totally did. Yui must have been surprised by Kurusu's sudden outburst. It was obvious she was telling a lie. I could see from the look on her face that she thought she'd seen something she wasn't supposed to see.
山添、ごめん。お前が嫌なこと頼んでもいいか。もしもユイがそうなら、犯人が逮捕されるまで、お前や有村と同じように僕が守らないといけないから。
はい。
Uki was surprised, but she seemed willing to help her old friend. She put the pajamas on the bed and stretched her hand out into empty air.
ゆいさん、見ていてね。
ウキちゃん、ダメ、やめて。
Kurusu let go of my arm and grabbed onto Yui, as if she was trying to stop her from showing it to Yui.
クルス、ごめん。でも手遅れになってからじゃ遅いんだ。だから。
This is I don't know why my brain went right to the stickers. This is such a more humane way of checking.
ほら、見えるだろ、ユイ。
Glad I'm not in charge
山添
here.
の手に何があるか。
Uki slowly drew it out of thin air, as it shone with a light no normal person could see. God, hers is so freaking cool. Like, this is just pure metal, right? Just sheer, like, oh man. And the hearts, dude, there's like a heart near here at the, like, the top. And then at the bottom, that's a neat little, like, motif. It's so cool. All right. It was the weapon that connected reality to the Dirac Sea and its ocean of negative energy, the D Sword. It was obvious that Yui's eyes were following Uki's sword.
見えるの？
Well, that's concerning.
見えるの？
Yui looked like she was about to cry. Then she nodded slowly.
山添、もういい。ありがとう。
The D sword disappeared from Uki's hands. There was nothing left but an awkward silence.
そんな。
I was right. Yui was a psychic. And Senri Minamisawa had almost killed her last night. October 24th, 2015, Saturday.
この匂いどこかで
Oh. This was the first thing Shinjo thought as he ducked under the crime scene tape and went inside the third floor condo. He knew this smell. But from where?
あ、そうだニューヨークで
When he was training in America, a local colleague had taken him to a cheap steakhouse. The waiter had brought him a disgusting grilled lamb steak. The smell was a mix of rotting animal blood and burnt fat. He hadn't even taken a single bite. And that was precisely the smell that filled the room right now. That's disgusting. The source of the stench was in the middle of the room, on top of the dinner table. Please tell me it's not like a human body. The forensics people, it's definitely a human body, okay. Must have finished their job because it had already had a sheet placed over it. Now it was just waiting to be carried out to the coroner. Shinjo put his hands together a moment in silent prayer, then flipped up the sheet. Is it gonna be horrifying? It's probably gonna be horrifying. The second he saw it, he yanked the handkerchief out of his pocket and forced it to his mouth to stop himself from throwing up. He knew it was disrespectful to the dead, but he couldn't help it.
ご苦労様です、新庄先輩。
He looked up and saw a younger detective talking to the forensics people. The detective lacked his usual energy. This was probably the worst case he'd ever seen. Shinjo didn't want to look bad in front of the younger kid, so he forced the handkerchief away from his mouth.
あ、ご苦労
What is it?
外車の身元ははっきりしたかい
The hell is that? It's like is that like a pipe?
それがですね、衣服を着用していない上に遺体の損壊が激しくて、今のところ確実なのは10代から30代の女性ってことしか。
He could see hints on the charred flesh that indicated the body had once belonged to a woman. But the face was so burnt that there was no way to distinguish any features. And even stranger, there was what looked like a metal stick coming out of her mouth. That's her mouth? Okay. The rod came out all the way below her abdomen, like a skewer used to cook a kebab.
10日ほど前でしょうか。近くの工事現場から鉄筋が盗まれたっていう届けが出てるそうです。
Piece of rebar. The detective flipped open his notepad.
鉄筋っていうとあれかコンクリートの壁に使う
ええ。外車の口から出てるのが。
I didn't know that was what that was called. It did look. I did recognize the item. It just I didn't know that's what it was called. Rebar.
そういえば昔こんな映画があったな
It was an old 80s horror flick that he'd seen with some friends in college. The movie was about a bunch of travelers who got lost in the jungle and eaten by cannibals. In one scene, someone had been cooked like this. And there was one more thing. This incident reminded him of a number of others that he'd seen recently. The return of the new generation madness.
まさかこれも
Date is wrong.
いやでも23日は
On October 23rd, the killer had spent the whole day going after Takeru Miyashiro and his friends, which meant the target had to be one of them.
新庄さん？
あ、悪い続けてくれ
Shinjo put the sheet back on the body again and made another short prayer.
外車の身元は未確認と言いましたが、自分の意見としてはおそらくこの部屋の住人と見て間違いないと思います。
灰田理子さんだったな
はい。
He flipped through his notebook and relayed to Shinjo what he'd learned from the condo's manager.
年齢18歳、独身で一人暮らし。職業は派遣のテレフォンサポートってことになってますが、派遣会社に確認を取ろうとしたところ、会社自体がもう存在していませんでした。
倒産したかあるいは水商売のためのダミー会社って可能性もあるな
その線については今表せてます。
で外車が彼女だと思われる根拠は
He Shinjo took out his own notebook and started to copy down the things he thought were important.
はい。契約以来、どうも本人しかこの部屋へ入った形跡がないようなんです。
ん？
鑑識からの報告では、室内から出た指紋や足跡は本人とおぼしきものだけで、不自然に拭き取った跡なども見られません。もちろん、それ以外の指紋もないわけじゃないんですが、どれも古いもので、おそらく以前の住人や業者だと思われます。鑑識も今回の件からは除外できるだろうという意見です。また玄関の靴跡も会社のものしか見当たりません。遺体発見時、玄関には2つの鍵の他に内側からチェーンロックがかかっていました。窓もしっかり施錠されていたので本人に間違いないこと。
Shinjo felt a little like he was going to faint.
じゃあ犯人はどうやってここに入って犯行に及んだんだ？
It would take some serious equipment to roast a whole person. You couldn't get that in here without leaving any traces. The younger detective must have been thinking the same thing.
これで普通の死に方をしててくれれば自殺ってことで新庄さんの手をお借りすることもなかったんですけど。
死に方に普通も何もないだろ
う。すいません。
1階のエントランスに防犯カメラがあったよな。
ええ、部下が管理人室で録画のチェックを始めていますが、今のところは何も。
Imagine trying to find a way to justify this as a suicide. Like literally how?
そうか。
Shinjo looked at the victim and then at the forensics people. They were frowning as they talked.
あの様子だと死亡時刻の推定もまだ無理そうだな。
はい、解剖に回してみないと何とも。火災報知器が作動していればすぐに分かったんでしょうが。
The two of them looked up at the useless devices on the ceiling.
壊されていたって？
はい。
誰に？いや、室内には彼女の指紋しかないんだったな。ということは本人か。
But why would she do that? Shinjo couldn't make any sense of it.
というか新庄さん、俺焼死の現場ってのは初めてなんですけど、こんな風に燃えるもんなんですか？
わからん。こんなの俺だって初めてだ。
鑑識の連中がね、全員首をひねってるんです。どうやって燃えたかわからないって。ガソリンや灯油を使ったってこんな風にはならないって。
And there was no smell of gasoline anyway. The only stench was of burning meat.
俺前にテレビで見たんですけど、やっぱいいです。
言えよ、最後まで。
怒りませんか？
内容による。
世界の心霊現象スペシャルとかいう番組だったかな。そこで人体の発火現象ってのが。
やめろ、バカ。
Shinjo poked the younger detective's head lightly. The detective apologized, but Shinjo hadn't stopped him because it was too unbelievable to be true. He'd stopped him for the opposite reason. He was probably right. Which meant he didn't want rumors flying around, even inside the police department.
パイロキネシスと言ったな。
Mio Kunasato, Hinai Emura, and Takeru Miyashiro had all used the word repeatedly. It was the power to set things on fire with your mind, and they said that the woman who was after Miyashiro and his friends, Senri Minamisawa, had it. Was this Riko Haida woman attacked by a pyrokinetic then? He came back to the same conclusion he reached earlier, but then soon shook his head. How'd she get the rebar used to skewer the woman inside the room? And how'd she get it skewered? Shinjo looked at the large window that dominated the room's east side. The curtain was open, and he could see the chaotic city of Shibuya outside. If the building was taller, the view would have been impressive. But from this height, you could see the dirty backsides of the surrounding condos and multi-purpose buildings. It was hard to call it a nice view. That probably made the rent a lot cheaper, though, he thought to himself as he began to examine the glass window. If If the killer had used some kind of power to get the rebar in from out the building across the street, this window would have been shattered. There wasn't a scratch on it.
こいつは俺が一人で考えてもどうにもならないな。
He hated to say it, but he needed a specialist like Mio Kunosato. So for now, he decided to focus on gathering information.
新庄さん。
A light tap on his back brought him back to reality.
防犯カメラをチェックしてた部下から連絡です。会社の顔がはっきり映ってる映像を見つけました。
Oh?
そうか、行こう。
When he finally got out of the room, he felt like he could breathe again. Disrespectful to the dead or not, he took a deep breath when he got outside. He went down to the first floor and looked at the video on the monitor in the manager's room.
管理人の話だと、灰田理子さんは必ずカメラから顔を背けるようにしていたそうなんですが、
取られたくない理由でも？
渋谷地震の時に顔に火傷を負ったとかで、人に見られるのを極端に嫌ってたらしいですね。
ああ、それで。
ただこの時は一瞬ですが偶然映ってしまったようです。
The timestamp on the screen indicated it was late at night on the 12th of October.
10月12日？それって確か。
He remembered writing that day down, so he flipped open his notebook.
ああ、そうだ。宮代君たちが初めて南沢千里に襲われたっていう夜だな。
先輩、灰田理子さん来ました。
He quickly turned his eye back to the screen. Okay. In the video, the door to the entrance opened and a woman came staggering inside. Perhaps her leg didn't work right, or maybe she was injured, because you could tell she was dragging it. So that's... Like, when they mentioned she was burned, this popped into my head. I was like, okay, maybe... Is it an alias? Is it... Or maybe it just isn't Senri. That's also entirely possible right now. Like... I could see that happening too. Her hair covered her face, making it impossible to read her expression.
おい、あれって。
ええ。
Shinjo and the other detective gasped. Riko Haida was holding a large object in her hands, something like a staff, and using it to support herself. It looked exactly like the iron rebar that was currently skewering her body.
まさか自分で持ち込んだ鉄筋で串刺しに。
It was just a recording, but Shinjo found himself holding his breath nervously, as if he was watching live footage. She walked right by the security camera. It did seem like she wanted to avoid showing her face. But she must have tripped on something when she was right under the camera, because she staggered. When she did, her hair flew backwards, and he could finally get a glimpse of her face. Shinjo's eyes went wide.
似てる。
All of her features matched the description. They were identical to the composite sketch based on a description by someone who barely survived an attack by this woman.
そんな。こいつ。
The girl in the video was... Oh my god. Okay, so that...
大丈夫よ、ユイ。安全になるまでずっと一緒にいてあげるから。
That opens so many questions. There's... That's so... That... Okay. I'm good. I'm okay. I'm okay.
ほら、元気出して。
Yui nodded. She was still pale. Not only had she gone through a lot last night, but she just found out she was a psychic. She wasn't looking good at all. I explained to her what I thought she needed to know, and then told her that no matter what, she must never be alone from now on. It was true that the return of the new generation madness had come to a temporary halt when Senri Minamisawa hadn't been able to kill anyone on the 23rd. But no matter what the rest of the world said, it felt far too early to declare this whole thing over.
でもね、こんな時にこんなことを言うのは変かもしれないけど、お姉ちゃん、ちょっとだけワクワクしてるんだ。
え？
ゆいと一緒にお風呂に入ったり寝たりするの久しぶりなんだもの。ゆいったらいつの間にか大人になっちゃって、すっかりゆうとのお姉ちゃんになっちゃったでしょ。たまには私の妹に戻って甘えてくれてもいいのになんて思ってたから。
やだもう。
Yui smiled, just a little.
ユウトはどうするって？
父さんの部屋にしばらく居候。
この部屋で一緒に寝ていいって言ったんだけどね。なんか恥ずかしいみたい。私は別に構わないのに。
ユウはのの姉が初恋の人だから。あ、これ内緒ね。絶対ね。
それは光栄だわ。ねえねえタクル、頑張らないとユウトに私を捕らえちゃうわよ。
Sometimes Kurusu would say things like that just to enjoy my reaction. Lately, I'd gotten a lot better at not reacting the way she wanted me to. I simply snorted, and she puffed up her cheeks and pouted.
で、ユイの能力なんだけど、本当に自覚とかないのか？
The small smile vanished from Yui's face.
そんなの急に言われても。
自分の身の回りで特別なことが起こったりとかさ。
特別って言うとユウのことくらいかな。
どんな？
ユウが嘘ついてもすぐにわかるとか。
それは超能力じゃないわね。お姉ちゃんなら普通よ。私だってタクルのついた嘘なんて簡単に見抜けるもの。
だからそこで僕を引き合いに出すなよ。
This time, my don't react skill had failed me. Kurusu chuckled, finally satisfied. Damn it. I felt annoyed for a moment, and then I realized that Kurusu was trying to send me a message.
なるべくユイを怖がらせないであげて。
That's what she seemed to be saying. Yeah, she was right. A normal girl like Yui would never be able to handle knowing there might be a serial killer after her. So Kurusu was deliberately pretending to be cheerful.
と
I realized that my tone had probably been too harsh, and I relaxed it.
他にはないかな。どんなことでもいいんだけど。
他に？
Yui looked down and thought for a minute.
そういえば本当に時々だけどユウの声が聞こえるような気がする。
声？
うん。例えばユウが忘れ物をして困ってたり怪我をして泣いてたり、そういう良くない声が聞こえてきて、それで急いでユウの学校へ行くと本当に怪我をしてたりするの。
なるほど。それかもしれない。
I wasn't a specialist, so I couldn't say for sure, but maybe you could call it psychic sympathy between siblings? Kunosato might know more, but for whatever reason, she had it out for us, and there was no way I was telling her about Yui. Good call.
ユウトにはそういうことはないのかしら。
大丈夫。あいつに能力はない。
I had already checked yesterday. I'd shown him Yamazoe's D-sword, and he hadn't shown any response at all.
なんだか私はユウの心配してるのにユウの方はそうでもないみたいでちょっと癪だけど。でもいいよね。ユウが狙われることはないんだもんね。
あ、あいつはターゲットにされないはずだ。
When Yui heard that, she finally seemed to feel better. Kurusu softly put her hand on Yui's head and rubbed it.
本当にいい子ね、ユイは。
やだ、やめてよ。
ダメです。
Kurusu grabbed Yui before she could escape and held her tight. It looked like she was about to kiss her at any second.
ユイ好きよ、大好き。
ののねがなんか気持ち悪い。助けてタクルに。
I couldn't help but smile.
気が済むまでやらせてやれよユイ。
助けてよ
Just when I thought it was safe to leave Yui with Kurusu. Some horrible nightmare fuel began. The three of us froze at the sudden sound of a knock.
まさかここ家の中だぞ。
The knock continued. Kurusu stood up and positioned herself between Yui and the door. We motioned for her to step back and put my hand on the doorknob. I remembered the terror I felt at Cafe Lax and gulped. To be honest, I was afraid, terrified. But I was the only one who could protect them right now.
は？
Suddenly, I heard an easygoing voice from the other side of the door.
宮代先輩ちょっといいっすかそれともクルス先輩となんかまずいことでもしてますか
Oh
お
boy.
前かよ。
あ、どうも
どうもじゃない。紛らわしいからノックすんなよ。
そういうわけにはいきませんってば。変な場面とか見ちゃったらどうするんです？
僕とクルスで変な場面なんてないからな。で、なんか用か？
あ、はい。ちょっと宮代先輩に話があるんで、いいですかね？
僕に？
ダイニングに来てもらっても。
なあ、構わないけど。
私たちも行った方がいいかしら。
Kurusu poked her face out from behind me and asked. Arimura stuck her hands out and shook them in what looked to me like a deliberate overreaction.
いえいえ、クルス先輩と橘姉はそのままラブラブしててオッケーっすよ。話って宮代先輩にだけなんで。
そう？
Arimura said her usual adios, gracias to a confused Kurusu, then dragged me out of the room. Adios, gracias.
なんだよ一体。
Ah,
クルス先輩にはまだちょっとな話なんで。とにかく来てください。見てほしいものが。
ああ。
I followed Arimura as she hurried away from Kurusu's room.
ああ、タク、ゆいちゃんどう？
うん。もう大丈夫だと思う。落ち着いたよ。
そっか、よかったね。
Uki was in the kitchen washing dishes. She looked at us. She let out a small sigh of relief. Even if she hadn't seen her for a long time, Yui was still her friend, and she was still worried about her.
ひなちゃん、お茶飲む？うきちゃんが入れてくれたのはとっても美味しいよ。ああ、いえ、私はそろそろ家に帰ろうと思ってるんで。
え？
I turned to look at Arimura, surprised. I thought she was staying here because there might be another attack like last night.
ひなちゃん帰っちゃうの？もっと合宿していこうよ。明日学校お休みだし。いやいや、宮代先輩のお父様にこれ以上ご迷惑をおかけするわけには。っていうか、ぶっちゃけこんなに泊まり込むと思ってなかったんで、下着の替えとかピンチでして。
そんな、別に遠慮しなくても。
おっと、ド変態め。限界を突破した下着を遠慮なく見せつけていいと？いや、むしろじっくり見せろと？一宿一般の恩義があろうと、そいつは聞けねえ要求だな。
Arimura pressed down on the hem of her skirt.
誰がそんなこと要求するか、そういう話じゃないだろう。
じゃあ何ですか？
だから事件が終わったっていう確証が得られるまで有村もここにいないか。その方が安全だろ。
ああ、なるほど。
Arimura scratched her cheek. And then she took out a more serious look.
セリ、ウキ、悪いんだけど、ちょっとだけ外してくれないかな。
She spoke pointedly to Serika and Uki. The two of them exchanged glances for a moment, but Arimura wasn't allowing any room for discussion. They left the room.
はあ。
Once we were alone, Arimura sighed a little and took her phone out of her pocket.
宮代先輩に話っていうのは、実はそのことです。
え？
つい今しがた、新庄さんからメールが来まして、私と先輩に大至急確認してほしいことがあるって。
新庄さんから？
すごく嫌なものを送りつけられました。デリカシーがないんでしょうね。大嫌いです、あの人。
Arimura expanded the attached image and looked away from the phone as she handed it to me.
それ、防犯カメラの映像のコピーだそうですよ。
I could see in the video the face of a woman I would never forget.
南沢千里。
My reaction was the opposite of Arimura's. I couldn't tear my eyes away from it.
間違いないですよね。じゃあ、新庄さんには先輩からそう言っといてください。私、あの人とはもう話したくないから。
ああ、わかった。これ、どこなんだろ
う。Arimura seemed annoyed.
その女のマンションとか、メールには書いてありましたけど。
マンションを見つけた？じゃあ、南沢千里は逮捕されたのか？
I finally managed to tear myself away from the screen and look at Arimura. She shrugged a little.
ま、似たようなものです。だから私は家に帰っても平気になりました。お世話になりました、先輩。ウキも立花姉も、もう安心していいみたいですよ。
どういうことだ？
死にました、その女。
は？
Arimura spoke without any real emotion in her voice.
死んだ？南沢千里が？
ええ。クルス先輩にはうまく伝えてください。私、そういうの苦手なんで。
I'm just waiting for the reveal of like, it turns out she died at exactly 11:59 on the 23rd.
それじゃ、そういうことで、あとはよろしくです。
She grabbed the phone from my hand and quickly deleted the photo. Then she bowed and left me alone in the dining room.
セリー、ウキ、話終わったよ。私帰るから、宮代先輩の相手してあげて。寂しがってるよ。
I could hear her voice from the hallway. I could also hear Serika, Uki, Kurusu, and Yui all talking. They were probably all saying something like, "You're leaving at this hour?" But I didn't hear their conversation at all.
南沢千里が死んだ？
The serial killer who was after us was gone? October 27th, 2015, Tuesday. Alright, it's a little early this time, but I'm gonna call it. It was a short one. It was a shorter one. But I am getting a really bad headache and I gotta go. So, I was kind of hoping it would just go away. It hasn't. So, I'm gonna go now. Bye.